Welcome to the Phil Lewis podcast. We are here at episode 4. In business, we talk a lot about qualities like resilience and grit and determination. And in this episode, we have a story that exemplifies those qualities. I talked to a remarkable entrepreneur, Donnie Maclean of Eat Balanced, about his story and what unfolded over many, many years as he tried to make his business work. Later on in this episode, I'll be joined by my good friend, the coach and consultant Claire Croft, who's had the dubious honour of working with me at Corporate Punk for about a decade now, and we'll get into some of the lessons from Donnie's story. But in the meantime, let's get straight into it. Here's my conversation with Donnie Maclean. Donnie, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hi Phil, thank you.
So give us a bit of background to your career and the work that you do and what the journey to date has been.
I've always been into business. I'm sort of third generation entrepreneur, and business studies just at school came very naturally to me. The teacher just said, Donnie just gets business. So that was a good start. I worked for other people for the first 10 years of my career, and then obviously had the itch that I needed to do my own thing. I was working in my family business at the time. My family business was energy, water and telecoms consulting, helping big businesses to reduce their costs and improve their efficiency and that kind of stuff. So I'd grown that business by a magnitude of 4 and improved the profitability and that kind of stuff. Had some good clients, but my father and my mother knew I needed to do my own thing, so I had a few different ideas, and I was doing a lot of sport at the time. I was doing triathlons and marathon swims and that kind of stuff, and I was looking at my own diet to make sure I was getting everything I needed. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized it's really not all that straightforward. There must be a business opportunity here. How can I help people to achieve a balanced diet? And to my surprise, Eat Balanced was available for trademark. So I managed to get that before I even started the business. And I had lots of different ideas of how I might approach it, but I knew I wasn't going to be a credible expert in nutrition. So I approached quite a few different doctors and professors of nutrition at universities around Scotland. And the one that I clicked with most was the professor of nutrition at Glasgow University. And he's an interesting character. When I approached him, he shot most of my ideas down in flames. But the one that stuck was creating a product that was a balanced meal. And he'd done some academic papers on that kind of thing. But because I had a pizza manufacturer as a client from being in my family business, I just joined the dots and came up with the concept of a balanced pizza. And it just went crazy from there. So we got on the BBC News, on the BBC News website. It was the second most shared page of the day on the whole BBC News website. It got loads of coverage and it was very exciting, but obviously people were wanting to try it. So there was a big flash bang, but commercially it didn't actually result in anything. But I did manage to close deals with Sainsbury's and Asda at that time. So my first ever customers were the multiples, and that was hugely exciting and terrifying, and the start of a lumpy journey. So as I was saying to your production team, I messed a lot of things up in the first year. I had been in business for a long time. I had a good business brain, but I was naive in a lot of ways about how the supermarkets work and how much is involved in educating the consumer when you're doing something properly innovative.
They're brutal environments, those supermarkets as well. I mean, I remember being probably 21, I think, and I had Sainsbury's as a client in my early 20s, and I remember going in and dealing with procurement people at Sainsbury's. And, you know, from the vantage point of many years down the line, can look at that and think, oh yeah, no, the games that are being played there and all the rest of it. But at the time, it was absolutely intimidating, and they were brutal, And but as we always say on this podcast, you weren't born experienced, So you said it was the start of a lumpy journey.
Yeah, so being in the supermarkets was a fantastic way to lose a lot of money. I lost everything. I eventually had to sell my house. I moved in with my mum in my mid-30s. I was just clinging on to keep the business going, even though it wasn't paying me anything. I was doing 80, 90-hour weeks, determined to keep it going, determined to make it work. But I was just hemorrhaging money, and
wind back. So we've just gone from I've landed these amazing deals with Asda and Sainsbury's into I'm reminded of the Richard Branson line about only an airline is the best way for a billionaire to become a millionaire. You've done these deals, but then you find suddenly you're hemorrhaging money. So join the dots on that for us.
So the environment in the supermarkets, they claim that they embrace innovation and they like new innovative brands, but it's not actually true. Unless you have a lot of money, you won't succeed in the first year. Even the big blue chip, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Mars, all of those guys have a multi-step gated process to bring a new product to market, and they can't guarantee that they'll succeed after the first year. And they pumped a lot of money into it. I was bootstrapping. I didn't have an investor. That's another story. I had someone lined up and they let me down at the last minute. But we can possibly go into that. So you need to have a lot of money to make any money in the supermarkets, and there's no guarantees that it will work out. So I had this innovation. I went into the frozen pizza aisle. It was perhaps a little bit naive because it was probably going to be better received by people in the chilled section, because that's more where people are looking for a bit of innovation. But from an operational point of view, it made more sense to have a big batch made, frozen, and then the shelf life is like a year. So you could have a production efficiency by making a big batch rather than having it chilled and making it every other day, small amounts. The manufacturer that I had chosen wouldn't have thanked me for that kind of business model. So in the frozen pizza section, people are used to buying on promotion. And what I didn't realize at the time was there's actually only 3 manufacturers that make every single frozen pizza in the pizza aisle for every retailer. They've got different brands, but because they have such a massive volume, the unit cost for them is substantially lower than a new brand coming into that aisle. So when people are used to buying on promotion because there's plenty of room for maneuver when you're making something that's cheap, I had to be playing the same promotion-driven game. And that meant that I was only really selling decent volume, the volume that they were pushing me for when I was on promotion. But I hadn't built that into my pricing, and I didn't have a unit cost that tolerated the ability for a good promotion. So I was cutting the price to as much as I could. But if I sold 5 times as many when I was on promotion, I still wasn't making enough money to cover the costs. Another way of losing money in the supermarkets is because I was doing something innovative, I had to educate the customer on what this new product was. So I had to do sampling in store. They don't let you do the sampling yourself. They make you go through their third party, and it's all stitched up. So you're paying, at the time it was £250 per store per day. So if I'm paying £250 and they sell maybe like 8 pizzas, I might make a fiver from the pizzas that they're selling. And if I scale that up to the 60 stores that I'm operating in, I'm just hemorrhaging money the whole time.
I can actually, as we're talking, I sort of feel this sense of like wanting to like lean in, and it's a pretty mixed metaphor or something, but stop the car crash in slow motion. It. I'm imagining the kind of the weight of that, but also the momentum of that. Actually, that sort of slow crushing, and it really just struck. Sort of two things struck me. One is to go from that sort of amazing flashbang moment of validation on the BBC to then this sort of brutal lesson in the business models of the supermarkets, and everything that comes with that, supply chain management and all the rest of it. That's one thing. But my attention is also drawn to how this must have felt as well, coming from the family that you come from, because you've also come from an entrepreneurial background. You've got a successful family business that you've left, and here you are. Let's go back to, you said you sold your house, moved it back in with your mum. So here you are with that kind of context as well around all of this. So it must have been brutal as a time.
Yeah, and this is only us scratching the surface, Phil. The manufacturer I was with, they were in a financially vulnerable position, so they gave me notice to find another manufacturer. And I did. And when I was just about to press the button to start with those guys, they went bust. So that the second manufacturer went bust as I was just about to start with them. So I had to find my third manufacturer, and they looked on the surface of it brilliant, very polished, lots of nice new machinery. But again, there was problems. They hadn't told me all the stuff that they were doing with my product. I'd licensed my recipe to them, but I established, because it was a couple of Muslim brothers that were running this factory. I didn't find out until after I'd left them, but they weren't actually fermenting the dough, because in their culture, that's seen as fermentation is seen as producing alcohol. So they were putting all sorts of flour improvers, all sorts of products that don't officially have to be on the label. And this is another interesting thing that I discovered, and possibly why a lot of people that are suffering from gluten intolerance are not really understanding why, because there's all sorts of other things that go into bread that are not on the label, so you can't identify them. So this was another thing, and they also were terrible at managing the orders. So when I came out of the supermarkets, I got a deal with a big pub chain, so 180 pubs. We had our small, round, individual kids product, and it was going well initially, but then they started messing up orders, and our service levels dropped, so we got dropped out of that one. So
you come out of the supermarkets, go again with the pubs,
mm-hmm.
then get let down by a manufacturer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I hadn't obviously made back the losses as a result of being in that pub chain. I'd made some back, but I ended up having to take a part-time job. I did not want to give up on this business. If you learn about me, I've been described as pathologically tenacious, because I just don't give up. When I'm determined that something has to happen, I will see it through regardless. I've done some crazy endurance feats, and I know I have the strength of will and the strength of character to see something through, even when the average person would think, no, that's not working.
Talk a bit more about that, and talk a bit more about tenacity and your experience of tenacity. And I guess you haven't given up, right? Mm-hmm. That's what's very clear in this story. Has there been time when you felt like giving up?
Mm.
Do you think it's ever right to give up? And I suppose as it relates to your story now, you know, I think it's possible to have a successful business and still wonder if actually you could have hung it up and done something else a few years ago. So what's your relationship with your pathological tenacity?
So, although it seems like I was just absolutely dead set on a particular path, it was very different, because throughout that time, throughout the 8 years, there were loads of pivots, loads of changes of direction, loads of reconsidering the marketing messaging, reconsidering the actual target market, redefining the product, redefining the brand. So I was on a path, but it was like a broad tunnel, and I was bouncing off the sides, up and down, left and right, throughout that period. I knew that I had to get the business to a stage where the tunnel was starting to open out and I could see daylight, but it was underground for a long time, and it wasn't until we started getting substantial volume and it started making money that the tunnel came up above ground. So there was a lot of changes in that time, and I had a very open mind for trying different things, but I knew that the core was a strong concept, that I had a popular food that was better for you, and I just needed to get that to the right product, marketed in the right way to the right people, and I found it eventually.
It's self-evidently a great idea. I mean, the thing that sort of comes up for me listening to you, though, I mean, I think about my own, you know, my own life, my own career, and you and I do very different things for a living, because I'm a coach and consultant, and I spend my life helping people understand and work through the problems that they've got in their organisations, with the people that they work with, and so on and so forth. And I know for me, I would also describe myself as very tenacious. My industry is a tough industry.
Mm-hmm.
I've been going at it, you know, in this round for 10 years. I've been independent for 15, had a brutal experience in my first consultancy. And for me, though, part of it is I find it incredibly difficult to separate who I am as a human being from the work that I do, because I think I was put on the earth to help people. That is my natural role. I consider what I do to be a vocation. And so my tenacity, which is born also of a fairly extreme work ethic as well, which I suspect you and I have in common, it is partly rooted in a deep sense of self-identity being connected to my own work and the value that I want to bring in the world. So the idea of the business, people talk about businesses being, you know, your baby or whatever, which I always think is a really strange kind of metaphor to put around business. But what I do recognise is that it is very hard for me to stop working on my business, or to give up on it, or to not be tenacious, because actually at some fundamental of it, it's kind of bound to myself. I don't know if that resonates with you at all, or in your own experience.
Yeah. So I think it's something that I learned later on, through all the challenges with the business. I also became a father, and
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I separated from his mother, and that was a very challenging time as well. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and he's the light of my life. And
How old is he now?
He's 7 now. So we separated before he was 2. But this was through all the pandemic stuff, because I had to put myself on furlough. I had to pretty much close the business, and the manufacturer only just survived by the skin of their teeth. But because I was on furlough, it actually ended up being one of the best things that happened to me, because it gave me the opportunity for a huge amount of introspection and a lot of potential for self-development and researching all sorts of aspects of myself and relationships and into the spiritual world and all that kind of stuff. So I managed to get a much better understanding of myself, and it massively improved my work-life balance as a result of going through that introspection and understanding the importance of being a father. I always wanted to be a father. It was quite late in my life when I became a father, and as I expected, he absolutely has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. So that has massively reprioritized my mindset. The business was my baby in the early days, and I just was not going to give up on it. I would never give up on my son. He is my number one priority. The business is my number two priority. So the work-life balance has naturally just established itself as a result of my life changes.
And just something that really interested me about your own story. I mean, you come from a family of entrepreneurs, as you mentioned at the outset of this conversation, and a family of successful entrepreneurs, from what I gathered from what you were saying as well. You're now a successful entrepreneur. There's no doubt about that. Very, I'm not sure these stories we tell on this podcast ever really have happy endings, because it's not Hollywood, but things have turned around in a good way for you, and God knows it's been hard earned. But at the same time, for a long time, it clearly didn't feel that way. And again, I wonder about that sort of tenacity, and that tenacity. You said you did a lot of introspection as well in your own your own development work, and the relationship between that and our families, our upbringings, our sense of self-identity, all that stuff I think comes into play, doesn't it? We start to think about, why is it we just won't give up,
Yeah, I mean, there was many times where I was thinking of giving up, but those thoughts were usually very short-lived, because it's fair to allow those thoughts to come up and just allow them to come up and out and deal with them as they arrive. Of course, I felt like giving up, but that wasn't an option. The feeling came up and out, and then I just focused on something else that was much more positive. So these emotions do bubble up, and you have to give them, you acknowledge them, you give them space to do their thing, but allow them to pass, So that's how I've always dealt with these challenges. Sometimes they're more pervasive than others. And yeah, my self-worth and my self-esteem and self-confidence were all tied up in all of this going on, and they were very low for a long time. But as I said, I was able to do a lot of understanding about myself and about relationships and about just humanity, and it was massively beneficial, because I understand that I am not the voice in my head. We could do another whole podcast on this kind of thing, where you are not the voice in your head. You are the entity that is observing the voice in your head. So you don't have to listen to the thoughts that come up that are negative. You acknowledge them, but let them pass. If you give them more credence than they deserve, then they become not a little fluffy cloud, they become a big thunderhead. And it's very easy to get caught up in the pervasive thoughts that end up doing a lot of damage. But if you let them come up and out and pass over, then they don't come and do more damage. If you suppress them, then it's like a jack in the box.
100%.
You're turning the little handle. You've
100%.
no idea when the lid's going to pop, but it does a lot more damage if you suppress these negative thoughts and emotions.
Give us a sense of how, over what period of time this was actually all unfolding. So going into the supermarkets, coming out the supermarkets, going into the pub chain, coming out the pub chain. Is this a journey of a year, a couple of years? I mean, how long is this?
So we were in the supermarkets for a year each.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we were in the pub chain for about a year as well. So this was taking us to 2014, 2015. I had a good concept, I just hadn't executed it properly. Originally, the pizzas in the supermarket were for the adult market, and I thought there's plenty of people that are keen to have a pizza that they enjoy, that they know is doing, giving them nutrition that's beneficial for them. But the feedback I was actually getting was that a lot of mothers in particular were feeding our pizzas to their kids and not telling them that it was actually better for them. So that was the nucleus of our principle now, which is health by stealth. So after 2014, after coming out of the pub chain, I focused in on the schools market, and that took another 2 or 3 years because it's a tough market to get into, but it's good business once you are in, because the default position in most schools and most sort of council areas is not to change anything. If it's not broken, then they won't try and fix it. So it's hard to wear them down and get the opportunity to provide them with our pizza that's better for the kids. And I had to, again, keep the margins very low to be able to compete in that market. But now we're doing about 8 million portions a year all around the UK. And I've just recently found out that we're the fastest growing food and drink business in Scotland. So I've stayed in the fight, and I've ground it out and
you
made
really
a lot
have.
of mistakes, but I've found the way of making it work.
Yeah, you really have. I mean, the interesting thing listening to your story, I mean, you mentioned endurance events, and there's something really interesting about the kind of mindset that will just keep going and keep going and keep going. And, you know, you're in the supermarkets, you're hemorrhaging money there. You know, you are, you know, selling your house, moving back in with your mum. You know, I would love to talk to you about how that felt and just get your sort of sense of that as part of the journey and all of this as well. So take us back there.
Yeah, well, it was a lot more than a year. The business didn't actually really start making money until year 7 or 8. So I was grinding it out, taking very little, living hand to mouth for a long time. It was brutal. I'm not going to lie. It was really, really tough. But I just knew that there was a really strong concept, and I knew that it was going to get there. So I just had to keep finding chinks of light to head towards. So yeah, I as I said, the endurance things were massively beneficial because, like, I raised a lot of money for a very good friend of mine whose son was ill, and in that year of raising money, I swam 1 million meters for this son of my very good friend. Unfortunately, the boy didn't survive, but it was it was a brutal process. But throughout that year, I did things like I swam the full length of Loch Lomond, which is 22 miles. I swam 1,000 lengths in the swimming pool, and That's 25 kilometers. So through those two big challenges, I just knew by getting through them, I had the strength of will and the depth of character to be able to keep going with this business. And it's kind of like in the stock market. If you see your investments going way down, you're not losing money unless you sell at the bottom. You're only crystallizing the losses if you give up, if you sell out at that stage. If you hang on with your investments, they will come back up. So in business, you only fail if you give up. You will find a way of if you stick it out and don't make the same mistake twice, then by the law of averages, you will get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a tremendously positive message. You mentioned earlier on about chinks of light. You've got to find a chink of light, and that helps you keep going.
There was a lot of darkness.
Well, by the sounds of it, yeah, and you know so talk more about those chinks of light over the years, because you were clearly winning distribution deals. For example, the pub chains, the supermarkets, however well or not so well sometimes they worked out. That must have felt like at least some validation of the idea. But what was some of the other moments that helped you to keep going?
There were some good people. There were people that I was kind of bouncing ideas off and that were encouraging me. I had a few sort of groups that I was getting some boosts from. Obviously just small wins, any kind of win that I could find to keep topping up my enthusiasm. Just wearing people down, and you have to in the food service game. It's like there was Glasgow City Council. They took our pizzas into all the schools, and that took me 5 years to close that deal. Just knocking the door regularly, reminding them that I was there. So yeah, just focusing on the little wins that got me through to the next little win. You will get knocks, and in small business, it's full of knocks. It's not for the faint-hearted, but there's always other people that have been in similar situations that you can latch on to, use as a sounding board. There's always something positive that you can find in any dark storm. It's whatever you can find that makes a difference.
Yeah, well, that, and I think in your case as well, by the sounds of it, no shortage of belief in what it is you were actually creating.
Yeah, so the concept was always the same, but I pivoted the business model, the target market, many times until I got this one right.
The other thing that sort of strikes me about that, though, is that if there's something that your story points to as well, I think it's the idea of an emotional connection to the thing that you've created, because you had an idea, you took that idea into the world, the world kicked your ass with that idea for the thick end of a decade, and nevertheless you never gave up on the idea. And for so many people who are entrepreneurs, there's so many reasons why work-life balance is a nonsense. It's all life, really. But the idea of the separation of the business from the individual, I think, gets very challenging for anybody in work. But I think particularly for entrepreneurs as well, or people who've run their own thing, where to a certain extent you can't but help the thing bear the imprint of the person on it. Yeah. And I guess your journey, I suppose, teaches us something about the emotional connection that you've had, and I suspect in the work you now have gone on to do, that sense of emotional connection to a business will resonate very deeply with the people you're trying to help, because that's the emotional journey getting out of a business is one of starting to let some of that stuff go.
Yeah,
It's not been your skill
bang on,
set,
Phil.
Donnie.
It's very astute. You've hit the nail on the head, absolutely. Because I think in the age of AI, the human to human connection is ever more important. And as we've identified, I've had a huge emotional roller coaster with this business. She was a cruel mistress for a long time, not paying me any money, and just giving me a lot of hassle. But I love the business now. I've got it to a stage where it's good, and I'm using it as a springboard for other things.
How do you think of your identity now, looking back on your journey over the course of the last 10 or 15 years?
Good question. I think it's multifaceted, I guess. What am I known for? Yeah, I guess the tenacity has been raised quite a few times. But yeah, with everything that I do, it always comes back to the human connection. I'm trying to do the right thing in the schools market. I'm trying to meet people where they are. So kids love pizza, but pizza doesn't have to be junk food. So I'm giving them a healthier version. They don't know it in the majority of cases, the health by stealth thing. But I'm allowing people to do what they do and enjoy what they do, but with a better version. So with everything that I'm trying to do, I'm trying to help people and make a mark on this world.
As we close this conversation, if we could go back to Donnie of whatever 7 or 8, 10 years ago, bounding into Sainsbury's head office in High Holborn with his healthy pizzas. What would you say to him now? What would your input to him be at this point?
Turn around. It's too early. Yeah, I shouldn't have jumped in at the deep end with both feet and tied together. I think I went in way too fast. I would have done it a lot slower and made sure that the product was exactly right, that the target market was exactly right, slowly built up a loyal fan base and then gone for the supermarkets. It was hugely exciting, but I believed my own hype. Like the PR went crazy and the supermarkets snapped it up, but I wasn't ready, the product wasn't ready, the market wasn't ready. So I was naive in a lot of ways, but I stuck it out and found a way to make it work.
Congratulations on the journey. I'm reminded of an old client of mine who used to talk about let's make sure we're not smoking our own press releases. Is one of the things he always used to say, which sounds very pertinent advice for you 10 years ago. Donnie, thank you for sharing all that. It's been a really interesting story and a tremendous lesson, actually, of just entrepreneurial resilience and adaptability and hustle and an ability to find light in amongst the darkness and all of that. So thank you for all that you've shared with us this morning. We will put links to Eat Balanced and Sell to Retire in the show notes as well. And thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Phil.
So here we are. It's the ad bit of the podcast, and that's normally the point where, if you're anything like me, your finger is itching for that fast forward button. But I would just ask you to listen to the following for the next 45 seconds or so, because it might genuinely be of interest. Especially if you're wondering how you can boost your team's productivity, your capacity to innovate, and your team's happiness levels as well. I want to talk to you about something that might be of value. Organisations love talking about culture. Many are not that great at working out exactly what they need to change in order to get people working together and business results moving in the right direction. Over the last decade, Corporate Punk has developed a unique impact culture formula, a way of working on culture that isolates and addresses the factors that genuinely influence organisational performance. This approach has won multiple awards, changed businesses for good, and even seen companies beat their internal performance benchmarks by up to 800%. Yes, you heard that correctly. It starts with a single day, an opportunity to bring your team together and get clear on what really needs to change and why. This is the opposite of fluff or pushing adjectives around on paper. It's real, practical, hands-on work that changes businesses for good. If that sounds useful, if things feel like they need a shake-up, go to corporatepunk.com/impact culture or drop us a line at office@corporatepunk.com and let's talk. See, that wasn't painful, was it? Now we can get back to the show. In the second half of this episode, I am joined by the coach and consultant Claire Croft. Claire and I have worked together for nearly a decade now, and one of the reasons why the relationship works is, well, we think quite differently about the same things sometimes, as you will hear in the second half of this episode. Claire, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Really interesting story I felt that Donnie had to share there, and there's quite a lot in it for us to examine. An incredible story of resilience, really. I mean, you have to call that grit and resilience and determination and all the rest of it. And I found myself, I'll be honest, sort of on the one hand, really wanting to honor that and really wanting to celebrate that, actually, because this is a tremendous sort of story of triumph against remarkable adversity. And then another part of me was really sat there thinking, good God, you know, when is enough enough, you know?
Yeah.
And actually in this determination, this dedication to succeed, there's something also about what's being sacrificed in that time and energy and all the rest of it. So it really prompted some reflections for me around, you know, the kind of trade-offs that we make, right, in our working lives and the deals that we make with ourselves, I suppose. I don't know if you went there in your own thinking.
Yeah, I really struggled with listening to it, to be honest, because it really brought up for me my experience with my own relationship with resilience and tenacity. And mine went in the wrong direction. And I didn't recognize boundaries around that quality in myself. And so I was listening to it like deeply appreciative of what this human being has done and achieved, whilst also going, no, stop. It's like you are going, like, there are so many signals here that your resilience is taking you to places that maybe are not good for you. But I think where I netted out is actually the power of purpose in resilience continuing to be something that pushes you forward positively rather than pushes you forward for the sake of it. Because what Donnie had was a real sense of purpose in his work and what he was trying to achieve. And I think a lot of people, their resilience is not always in service of fulfilling a purpose. It's in service of false constructs around what it means to be successful in the world of work.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, that point around purpose. I mean, I am something of a skeptic on purpose, and the reason I'm a skeptic on it is what can happen is it becomes the kind of sticking plaster for a much more broken leg. You know, that there's things going wrong in organizations a lot of the time that are really never going to be solved by purpose. You know, purpose is not going to compensate for lack of quality treatment of people, for example. And purpose can breed resilience, but at the same time, actually, it cannot be an excuse for a culture that itself requires resilience because it's very busy mistreating its people, and so on and so on and so forth. This story is a healthy example in some ways, I think, of a relationship with grit, determination, resilience that is actually properly connected to purpose. I wanted to bring all this forward into the world, and actually I'm just going to keep going until I find a way to do it. And there's something quite inspiring about that, I think, but there's also something that feels really true. He had a vision and he went in pursuit of it, you know.
And it was meaningful, right? And it was from within himself, an impact he wanted to have on the world. I mean, I do see where you come from with purpose, and I think for me, purpose in organizations is at best a 2-hour workshop with an exec team. There are very few businesses who are truly operating from a place of purpose. When a business is clear on what it is genuinely there to do and achieve in the world, actually some of the cultural factors you're talking about become easier to challenge and manage, because you can question in service of something. When there is no frame of what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it, it's hard for people to challenge the context they find themselves in.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the whole point about purpose as it relates to entrepreneurs is, of course, quite different to purpose as it is in corporate life.
Yeah.
I mean, I've said for years, I think all entrepreneurs, all of us who run our own businesses, and that's you and I as well, right? We all have to be a little bit mad, don't we? There's a substantial risk of failure, and a lot of businesses don't actually make it to the end of year 2. So you sort of find yourself going, well, you're more likely than not to fail. So that's point number 1. And point number 2 is you're by definition entering usually very crowded, very competitive spaces where actually at the same time there's a lot of things stacked against you. So you have to, the thing that has to drive you in the end is an almost at some level messianic belief of what it is you're trying to do in the world, and the fact that there is space for you in the world, and the fact there is a need for what you offer in the world, and so on. And this story is almost an example of, someone's belief in what they're doing, and almost like the world was then going, we're going to strip everything away from you along the way to really check the level of that belief.
I think an entrepreneur's definition of failure is different to those who are employed's definition of failure. And failure for an entrepreneur is, I didn't give it a go. I think the thought of not trying to achieve is what ultimately is defined as failure by most entrepreneurs. They would rather have a go and not get there than not have a go at all. And in that is a set of capabilities around their relationship with risk, their relationship with ambiguity, their relationship with challenge. They just have a very different relationship with those things to most of us. The thing that I think was really interesting about Donnie's story, you're absolutely right. It was like, we're going to test you, we're going to test you, we're going to test you. But what he was brilliant at doing, which I think many of us struggle with, is he could hold on to the core of what he was trying to do, but he was immensely adaptable towards how he achieved it. So he pivoted with relative ease, which I thought was really, really impressive, and ultimately is why he now is experiencing success today. And I think a lot of the founders you were talking about that don't survive past 2 years is because there is more of a fixed mindset, not just about the what, but the how.
It's a really interesting point. I mean, what that brings up for me is the idea that, I don't know, resilience and adaptability are different qualities, aren't they? I'm very fond of talking about the book, The Warrior Within, the Fighting Philosophies of Bruce Lee. It's that idea of being bending like the bamboo rather than standing mighty like the oak, because ultimately in bending like the bamboo, you're kind of working with the energy and you can still snap back and put the boundary in place, but ultimately it's a stronger position than just standing there and yielding, which actually in the end means you might get ripped up by the winds. So I think you're absolutely right. I think there is something very, very important in that story about the willingness to adapt. And I guess it's holding that tension, isn't it, between, on the one hand, I am ruthlessly dedicated to and devoted to the pursuit of this idea, this goal, if you will. But how I get there, that's something that I'm willing to kind of take a view on,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, at the heart, though, of both of resilience and adaptability for me is optimism. People get really confused about optimism. They sort of have this Lego movie, everything is awesome type definition of optimism. But true optimism is the ability to stare challenge directly in the face and believe positive outcomes are still possible despite that challenge you're staring at. And I think he also demonstrated that, and that was an enabler to his resilience being sustained. And I think it was an enabler to his ability to adapt to changes in what the market was telling him they were going to tolerate. The amount of rejection that man took was huge, absolutely huge. But he lent into it and saw that challenge was trying to tell him something rather than just it allowing that challenge to consume him. And that's optimism.
Yeah, I mean, I did a psychometric on emotional intelligence. You and I have talked about this before, and I was quite surprised to see myself scoring very highly on optimism relative to some of the other dimensions, because I would not describe myself as a naturally optimistic human being. And you know me extremely well. I'm not sure maybe you would describe me as a naturally optimistic human being, but I am actually quite, I guess my self-image is sort of relatively dour northerner, you know, and yet actually when you define optimism in that way, which is it's the, you know, the ability to stare a challenge in the face and still find something worth pursuing, still find something good, that kind of ember of something good you want to kind of blow on and make it into a flame again. That does resonate, actually. And I think any of us who have been in business for any length of time, I would imagine there is some correlation to optimism and longevity of business, because I think ultimately what we are setting out to do in the world is so unbelievably tough when you're out there, you know, running an independent business of any shape or size, that actually if you didn't have a baseline level of optimism, you would probably give up the ghost. Maybe not, maybe before Donnie did, because I mean, he really did stick there right until the, you know, when a lot of us, I think, would have given up and gone home. But again, he's an edge case in that regard as well, you know.
Yeah, and I have a real issue with the phrase giving up, right? Because there's so much judgment in that phrase. And, you know, he used it himself, you know, talks about you only fail if you give up. But I always feel like the question is always, what are you actually giving up in the pursuit of never giving up? And for a lot of us, what we are giving up is our friendships, it's our family relationships, it's our health, it's our well-being, you know. So I have a massive issue with the idea of giving up on a business. I think at some point you have to step back from business and go, who am I as a human being? And what does success mean in my life in the round? And, you know, I think, to be fair, Donnie did get there in terms of his perspective has shifted in becoming a father. And that's a great, you know, life moment for all of us to kind of gain some more perspective. But I find the idea of giving up on business a really unhelpful frame.
It's a really healthy challenge, that, and yeah, I'm glad you called me on it. Actually, I think the phrase that I think is maybe a healthier phrase might be something like letting go. Right, that could be maybe a healthier phrase. Because the other thing that struck me listening to what you were saying is that sometimes we're all very loss averse, aren't we? So when we are thinking about, if we want to use the vernacular of giving up, or we want to talk about letting go, what we're thinking about is what is being lost, or what is potentially being lost in that moment, not what is it we could gain. So whether that is, you know, to your point, time with friends, time with family, time to work on a different business idea, you know, all of those sorts of things have a potential to come in, you know, if we create the space in our lives for them to come in.
I always believe in the need to be open to the universe talking to us, right? And sending us signals. And the thing when we get so myopic in our focus of, I want to achieve this thing, we miss the signals. We stop listening to it's a bit like, you know, when you buy a new car, say you buy a Mini, you start seeing them everywhere, right? You only see what you're being trained to see. And when we are myopic on what we want to achieve, everything we pay attention to is in service of that goal. And our field of vision narrows.
I guess if we think about this story of Donnie, I mean, without any shadow of a doubt, you listen to his story and you go, look, the decisions that he took in the end paid off for him, right? So he has a terrific business. He's doing genuinely valuable work supporting the health of children. He's got a great long-term means of distribution through schools and so on and so forth. Like, that is a successful business by anybody's yardstick.
Absolutely.
He's gone to the second one now. He's doing something else, So fair play to him. And yet, listening to that story or sitting with him and having that conversation, it really brought up some stuff for me about exactly what we were just talking about, right? It brought some stuff up for me about what am I sacrificing in terms of the goals I'm pursuing professionally? And have I got my life in balance in a way that feels appropriate to me? That was something I found myself really thinking about. I also found myself thinking about that sort of, because I'm very, very driven and can drive myself to the point of burnout sometimes as well. And it really had me reflecting that story on what is it in me where does that drive come from? And again, you're into the nature nurture discussion at an abstract level, but for me, I know where it comes from. I've certain elements of my upbringing, for example, certain ways that I was schooled, my family environment, all the rest of it, inculcated in me a belief that fundamentally my value is pegged to how productive I'm being in the world and how hard I work in the world. So that's something that I have to sort of manage. What it pointed to for me was, well, how conscious are you being in the choices you make about the trade-offs that you are making in your life, Phil? Right, effectively directing that question at myself, and also because you do index so highly on drive, what's your relationship with the root causes of that drive, and are you checking in to make sure that they're healthy?
Yeah, I mean, look, my mind is desperately unkind to my body. It really refuses to listen to it, and I will just keep going. And that for me does come from a childhood in which I was very unwell a lot of the time, spent a lot of time in hospital. And if I just rolled over, I would never have done anything, So I just built this sense of you have to keep going. And in 2011, I learned that's not a great strategy long term. And I was very unwell, physically unwell, and I was off work for 5 months. So on paper, I learned the lesson that your drive needs boundaries, that you need to take care of yourself. And yet here we are sat in 2025, and I haven't burnt out as much as I did in 2011, but there have been 2 periods of time since where I have not learnt my lessons, and I keep going. And the problem is my drive brings me success. It makes me good at what I do, right? So I get rewarded for my drive by having really great client relationships that last for years and years. I don't think I have a particularly bad reputation amongst my clients for the quality of what I do. We win awards for it, right? So the problem is the beast gets fed. It gets lots of evidence that if you do work really, really hard, and if you do just go, you will have the impact you want to achieve. And I want to be really clear. It's not about financial success. It's about professional success. It's about achieving the impact you want to have in the world. And that's even worse than just wanting financial success, because it's about my intrinsic motivators get fulfilled and served and honored. So it's a really addictive little cycle that you get into. As I'm getting older, though, what I am seeing, particularly in coaching work, more than maybe in our corporate punk work, in terms of when we're consulting, is when that perspective, that distance between ourselves as human beings and our work is not in place, burnout is going to happen. The cost of it's huge right now, because none of us are paying attention to ourselves closely enough and going, is what I'm doing and how I'm doing it sustainable and right for me as a human being? And by the way, for my business, because when burnout happens, businesses suffer just as much as the poor individual it's happening to.
Forbes puts the cost of burnout at somewhere between $4,000 and $21,000 per employee per year in the US, which doesn't sound like a lot until you start extrapolating it across organizations. It's a vast amount of money. I mean, you raise such an interesting point, though, about the innate ambivalence of our relationships with these sorts of internal drives, right? So I think you and I have this in common, right? We're both driven by a value of excellence in our work. And also you and I are both highly neurotic people as well. I think it's probably fair to say, like we worry about things, both of us, quite a lot. Now that brings with it all sorts of challenging emotional consequences, but actually at the same time, it brings with it success because it actually brings a focus on excellence, right? It brings the fact that you worry about something, the fact that you care about doing it so well, actually, it also means you get better at it as well. So, and that tends to then, as you rightly say, pay off reputationally, pay off, in terms of quality of outcomes for clients, yes, pays off financially and so on and so forth. So then you can end up on this sort of treadmill. If you come across the Enneagram at all, one of many sort of different psychometric profiling tools that are out there. So I'm an achiever in the Enneagram, right? So the achiever is, I think, a 3 on the Enneagram. But right at the heart of the driver of the achiever is shame. So there's this idea in the end that actually what we're doing is we're going after achievement, because if we go after achievement, what we're actually seeking to avoid in ourselves is an overwhelming sense of shame. And ultimately, actually, we're looking for a balm. So we're looking for, if I achieve, in the end, I will be able to cancel out that sense of shame, which of course doesn't work. So, and you and I go into some incredible boardrooms, leadership teams, speak with really amazing leaders, both in terms of our joint work, but also the work we do independently as well. And a lot of the time you're working with highly driven people, and I wouldn't want to speculate on anybody, any one individual, or sound like I'm being generalistic here, but you do wonder what some of those really deep emotional drivers actually are. And it feels like the road to getting all this stuff into a kind of healthier balance, the road of, understanding how to, nurture one's sense of drive, but making sure it's serving you in the right way, is actually ultimately starting to tend to some of that deeper emotional stuff. And then if you can start to do that in the right ways, then actually you can ultimately establish a right kind of balance. And balance is the key thing here, right? It's not like cancel out your drive. It's actually understand where it's serving you, understand where it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. And fair play to Donnie. I actually thought the biggest success in everything he shared was his own introspection, right? The fact that he used COVID to think deeply about who he is as a person and how he's showing up and the impact it's having on himself and others. And actually, that work that he did when he had that time is what's created the shift in perspective. So now business isn't the number one priority, it's the number 2 priority. And so when you do this, when you start asking yourself questions, new insight is possible. And the other thing I think is such an important piece of thinking for everybody to do is, where do I want to be in the end? Like, go to the end state. What do you want to be able to look back and say of yourself, of your work, of your life? Because that clarity of what does the end point of success really look like can bring forth new thinking about how you're showing up today. And so I don't think you should just look at your mental frames and your deep-seated emotions and feelings. Listen to your body as well. Like, what do you know about your body and what your body needs? Because there's no point healing the mind if you're not healing the body as well. They are symbiotic. They're one thing. Look after them both.
Spot on. I mean, the other thing, of course, it must be said about Donnie's story is that, yes, the capacity for self-reflection is clearly there, and he did it in COVID. But for a lot of people running businesses or leading businesses, time is really in short supply. And the one thing that reflection requires is time. We have to have the space and time to think. Coaching can help with that, clearly. But it is about carving out that reflective capacity. And that's not easy a lot of the time because of the various pressures that we're under. And it's really easy to deprioritize that sort of work as well. Looking after our health is absolutely integral to leadership. If we're not mentally healthy, if we're not physically healthy, we can't lead our businesses, we can't lead our people. So as we as we start to think about wrapping up this conversation, always incumbent on us when we've been doing this kind of reflection together in these second half of this podcast is to try and extract some lessons that will be useful for our listeners. I mean, two things that have really hit me about this conversation. I will be spending some time on the back of this recording reflecting on my own language, particularly my choice of the phrase, use the phrase giving up, which is a really good challenge. And actually it's one of those telltale phrases, isn't it? Which, you know, reveals something about our own internal relationship with success, failure, the choices we make, all those sorts of things. And I think is really something which should be good for us any of us who use that phrase to actually think about. The other thing I really take away is that point about optimism. And I think, you know, we have a preconception sometimes, don't we, that optimism is just sort of always look on the bright side of life, kind of sunny side up stuff. And actually, yes, of course, that's part of it, you know, but actually that thing about being able to spot opportunity and challenge, and that thing about being able to find the little spark that means it's worth keeping going, which is so evident in what Donnie had to share, and I think really honors him and his story. That point about the cultivation of optimism and how central that is to success actually really stays with me. How about yourself?
I feel like the need to look inwards as part of your drive is a really important reminder, actually, because most people who have extremely high drive tend to be also highly successful, and they're getting the hits. They're getting the dopamine hits too regularly. So the willingness to go in and kind of go, what is my long-term sustained definition of success for myself as a person? That feels like such an important reminder for all of us right now. And I appreciate what you're saying about it can be really, really difficult to find the time, but life is just making decisions about what to vote for every day. If you vote yes for something, you're voting no for something else. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us, to remember, vote yes for yourself beyond your business. And I feel the other point that actually just what you were sharing just before really hit me, the disappointing situation we are in where working like a dog is still being celebrated, and if not just celebrated, demanded. And it made me think about the generational tensions that are present in work right now. And personally, on some level, I massively envy generations that are younger than me, that came after me, because they have seen something in what's broken in how we work, and they are challenging it. So the other lesson for me is, what is it we can learn from younger generations? It's not that they don't want to work. I really challenge that view. They want to work differently, and maybe we should think about working differently too.
As always, wonderful to chat, my friend. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Huge thanks there to Claire. And thanks also again to Donnie. It's been a really interesting and I hope valuable episode from your perspective as well. If you do find value in the Phil Lewis podcast, well, yep, the usual request is about to come along the way. If you could like us, rate us, leave reviews, subscribe and share with anybody that you think might benefit from this, we'd be hugely appreciative. This podcast is a labour of love, and we are just trying to get the insights from it into the ears of as many leaders as possible, in the hope that it helps and also builds optimism at what is actually quite a difficult time for many of us out there at the moment. In the meantime, thanks as always for listening, and I will see you soon on another episode of the Phil Lewis podcast. Bye for now.